With the NBA season starting up very soon, I wanted to give you guys 20 candidates that could be traded this NBA season. Some of these guys are all NBA players or all-stars or just maybe role players that could be valuable to a team that is buying at the trade deadline. I'm going to go through each 20. I'm going to give a reason why they could be traded. Obviously, not everybody here is going to get traded unless they do, and that would be a pretty cool NBA season. But if there's somebody here that you think has no shot at getting traded, please let me know why down below. And if there's a player that I didn't mention today that you think will get traded this season, also let me know down below. So the first player we're going to talk about, for some reason, it has been in trade rumors for the last year, and I don't know why, but he's still in them today, and that's Walker Kessler of the Utah Jazz. Walker Kessler was included in that Rudy Gobert trade back in 2022. He had a great rookie season. He actually got Rookie of the Year votes as well, stealing one away from Paolo Banchero, and he didn't improve last year, but I also don't think he took a step back. He's still a really good rim protector in this league, and the Jazz just had a really crowded front court with Kessler. They had Kelly Olynyk at a time, Taylor Hendricks, who they took in the first round. Oh yeah, Lauri Markkanen, their max contract player. John Collins, they had a Drew Eubanks this offseason. There's just a ton of front court depth in Utah, and I don't think Walker Kessler was given the right opportunity in year number 2. And this team also lacks a true point guard at the moment, so Utah seems like they want to go in another direction. They don't seem like they want to give him a long-term contract, and there's plenty of teams out there that could use a big man, like the Knicks, the Lakers, the Pelicans, that are definitely going to be calling the Jazz's phones all season long. The Brooklyn Nets have to be sellers at the deadline, right? No way this team is going to be within 10 games of a playoff spot come February. So a player that I think, if he comes back to being an elite three-point shooter again, volume-wise, is going to be a very interesting trade target, and that's Cam Johnson of Brooklyn. Last year was a down year for Cam Johnson after getting that contract extension. Yes, he was worse in the full year sample size with Brooklyn than he was in the half season after the Kevin Durant trade back in 2023, but his worst season was still an elite three-point shooting season. He shot 39% from 3 on 6 attempts a night. He was just a little bit more inconsistent at attacking the rim or his mid-range jumper, and the defense also didn't look great either, but that's what it's like when you're not in a winning environment, and I think Cam Johnson could be a very appealing trade asset to a team that's looking for an elite three-point shooter, either in their starting lineup as a stretch 4, maybe as a 3 more on the perimeter, or just somebody that could be a great shooter for you off the bench, because we've seen how valuable shooters can be in the playoffs, like the Knicks with DiVincenzo last year, Duncan Robinson on the Heat in the past. These guys can make or break a playoff series, and that's what Cam Johnson could be for a contending team this season. The third player we're going to talk about is definitely going to be one of the better players we're going to mention in this video, and it's because he's a free agent at the end of this year, and that's Brandon Ingram of the New Orleans Pelicans. So there's been a trend so far. Like Cam Johnson and Walker Kessler, Brandon Ingram's 2024 season was looked at as a down year compared to his 2023 season. Ingram's point per game total dropped by 4 points. The assists went down, the rebounds went down, the three-point shooting went down, the free throw attempts went down. And at the end of that 2023 season, everybody thought Brandon Ingram was the franchise player for the Pelicans. And after last year and currently, that's going to Zion Williamson right now. And if you have to trade for Brandon Ingram, you're also going to have to give him arguably a max contract. That's what he's looking for out there. He's 27 years old. He's still in his prime. And I do think he could be a top 3 option on a championship team. I just don't think that's going to be in New Orleans, and this team desperately needs a center. There's been rumors that Herb Jones is going to start out at the center spot for them. Herb Jones is 6'8", and he's one of the best defenders in the NBA, but that's going to be tough going up against guys like Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic, and Victor Wembanyama in the West. So I could see the Pelicans pivoting and trying to make a move and sending off Brandon Ingram to a team and getting a center in return. So there's 2 scenarios for the Miami Heat this season that's going to result into 2 players we're going to talk about. The first guy is going to be Tyler Hero, and I know he's been in trade talks pretty much every year of his career. He was hurt in the 2023 playoffs when the Heat made a run to go to the NBA Finals, and last year he was banged up as well. He only played 42 out of the 82 games last season, but what's been consistent over the last 3 years, he's been one of the better three-point shooters in the league when you just look at players that take over 6.5 threes a night. 3 years ago, he shot 40% from 3 on 7 attempts. 2 years ago, 38% from 3 on 8 attempts. And last year, he did shoot 40% from 3 on 8 attempts a night. He's an elite free throw shooter. He's a great shot creator off the bench, but Tyler Hero's contract is ascending. So each year, he's making more percentage of your team's cap space. And if the Miami Heat want to win with Jimmy at the 1, Bam at the 2, they could look to trade Tyler Hero, who could still be appealing to teams this season, because it does seem like the Jimmy Butler Miami Heat window is closing very soon. The Knicks made the biggest trade of the offseason when recently they traded for Karl Anthony Towns, because Mitchell Robinson is going to be out until January, and he's making the perfect amount of money to also get traded this season. The Knicks had to trade for Karl-Anthony Towns when Isaiah Hartenstein went to Oklahoma City and Mitchell Robinson suffered another injury, someone that's been injury prone throughout the course of his career. And until January, the Knicks are going to give a bunch of guys backup center run. Precious Achiuwa, Jericho Sims, Ariel Hukporti. And if one of those guys can stand out and be a legitimate backup center to Karl-Anthony Towns, that's just going to make Mitchell Robinson even more expendable. Because right now the bench scoring is Miles McBride and Cam Payne and Landry Shamet. So that's not great right now. Mitchell Robinson's making perfect amount of money, 14, 15 mil a year, or that could get traded to a center needy team that's looking to invest into Mitchell Robinson long term. One of the more underrated players that could be available at this year's trade deadline is Colin Sexton of the Utah Jazz. He was in that Donovan Mitchell trade with Lauri Markkanen, and he was solid for Utah in his first year back fully healthy after suffering a major injury in the 2022 season. And last year, he was a fantastic player for the Utah Jazz. Across 78 games, he shot 49% from the field, 39% from three, 86% from the line, and also averaged a career high in assists, 5 a night. 19 points and 5 assists on great efficiency could be very appealing to a team at the deadline. Sexton is still just 25 years old, and he's on a great contract over the next 2 years. $18 million this year, $19 million guaranteed next year. And if Utah doesn't think that they're going to extend him after the end of the 2026 season, I think they can get multiple first-round picks for him at this year's deadline. Another Brooklyn net that just feels like it's inevitable that he's going to get traded this year is Dorian Finney-Smith. So Dorian Finney-Smith is making $15 million this year and has a $15 million player option next year. And for someone that's a switchable defender at 6'7", he can guard shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards. He's an above average three-point shooter. That is going to have some value to contenders on the open market. And for Brooklyn, why hold on to Dorian Finney-Smith? If you can get a nice draft pick or a young player in return for him this year, you take that. You want to bottom out this year anyway. Dorian Finney-Smith on the roster serves you no justice long term because he's 31 years old right now. Next player we're going to talk about is a former Brooklyn Net, and that is going to be D'Angelo Russell of the LA Lakers. The LA Lakers are in a very interesting position this year because I don't think this team right now on paper is good enough to contend with the top tier teams in the NBA, let alone in the Western Conference. D'Angelo Russell is on a one-year deal worth $18.5 million. And I'll admit it right now, I did not think D'Angelo Russell was going to be good last year, and he was much better from 2023 to 2024. Last year, he averaged 18 points, 6 assists, and shot 46% from the field, 42% from three, and 83% from the line. And he stepped up in moments when Anthony Davis or LeBron James wasn't playing. And he wasn't the greatest player in the playoffs, but he's someone that's making the perfect amount of money that the Lakers could try to move maybe alongside a younger player like Jalen Hood-Schifino or Dalton Connect if they get desperate at this year's deadline to upgrade that backcourt, because I don't think I could buy into Austin Reeves and D'Lo in that backcourt defensively. The third and final Utah Jazz we're going to talk about is going to be Jordan Clarkson, who did have a down year last year as well. He's slated to make $14 million this year and $14 million next year, which isn't too much in current NBA cap space. That is less than the mid-level exception. Clarkson was solid in 2023, putting up 21 points on 44% from the field and 34% from three. Last year, though, it was an abysmal season for Clarkson. 41% from the field on 15 attempts tonight and 29% from three on 5.5 three-point attempts. For somebody with his volume, he was one of the worst players in the league. I think he can have a bounce back season, and I don't think he would go for too much. Like, if you're trying to trade for Colin Sexton, you're going to have to give up a decent amount, but I don't think the Jazz would really want too much in return for Jordan Clarkson, who's going to be 32 years old this season and definitely has a ceiling on what he could be for you as a starter when the games matter the most in April, May, and June. This player is already banged up, and maybe he's going to be a buyout candidate even if he doesn't get traded at the deadline, and that's going to be Malcolm Brogdon of the Washington Wizards. Malcolm Brogdon was traded 2 off seasons ago from Boston to Portland in that Drew Holiday deal, and then was traded again this offseason in the Deni Avdija trade. He's going to be 32 years old this year. In the last 3 years, he's played 36 games, 67 games, and then 39 games last year. I don't expect him to play more than 60 games this year for the Wizards. He's still a good three-point shooter and playmaker, and he did win 6th Man of the Year in 2023, which wasn't too long ago. He is making $22.5 million this year, so if we can't prove that he's healthy and show what he was in 2023 with Boston, maybe teams aren't going to want to trade because that is a decent salary to match up with. So if a trade doesn't happen, I fully expect him to get bought out by Washington, and he's going to be on a playoff team, which is going to be one of the premier playoff pickups. Let's go up north here. We're going to talk about a Toronto Raptor, and that is going to be Kelly Olynyk. I do feel like the Raptors have an underrated center rotation. Like, you have Jakob Poeltl, who I think has become underrated in this league, and then you also have Kelly Olynyk, who I think has been underrated in this league for the last 4 seasons. He has quietly turned into one of the best three-point shooting big men in all of basketball, and also a phenomenal playmaker as well. He has shot over 37% from three and averaged over 4 assists a night since 2021. That is very valuable for a big man, and he's slated to make $12.5 million this year, $13.5 million next year, I could totally see a team like the Knicks trying to go from Mitchell Robinson to Kelly Olynyk, or a team that needs a big man as a starter off the bench and could be looking at 33-year-old Kelly Olynyk. This would be a very big trade financially. The next player we're going to talk about is Jeremy Grant of the Portland Trailblazers. Jeremy Grant got that massive 5-year deal from the Portland Trailblazers in the 2023 offseason, and he's slated to make $30 million every year for the next 4 seasons. And it would have to be a desperate team that I think would want Jeremy Grant, because I feel like Portland would be open to moving him. Maybe a team like the Warriors, the Clippers, or even the Lakers can get that matching salary that can get Jeremy Grant for basically nothing. Kind of like when Utah traded for John Collins a couple years ago, it didn't cost them basically anything due to how much John Collins was making. We'll talk about another player that re-signed with this team in the 2023 offseason, which was kind of a shocker, but he's turning into a nice trade asset currently, and that is Kyle Kuzma of the Washington Wizards. Kyle Kuzma is on a really good contract. Last year he made $25 million, and it's descending over the next 3 years. $23.5 million this year, $21.5 million next year, and then $19 million in 2027. And Kyle Kuzma was still a solid offensive player last year. 22 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 4 assists a night, which was a career high. And he shot 46% from the field and 34% from 3. And I do think in a lesser volume role, where he's going to have a lower usage, but he's going to be playing more winning basketball, he could be a great trade piece at the deadline and may only cost you 1 first-round pick. Okay, this one's a wild card. I don't know if it's going to happen. It would only be if this team is trying to make a major change at the deadline, and that is Jonathan Kuminga of the Golden State Warriors. So Golden State lost Klay Thompson this offseason. They didn't add a number 2 to Steph Curry. They struck out on Lauri Markkanen, they struck out on Paul George, and if Jonathan Kuminga is playing well enough, but not too well where Golden State wants to commit a rookie max to him, they could look to trade him at this deadline for a proven veteran to help Steph and Draymond. Because I'm sure they would love to move Andrew Wiggins, or maybe even Draymond now, but nobody's taking on those contracts. And Kuminga improved a ton last year. He went from 10 points in year number 2 to 16 points in year number 3 on 4 more shots a night. The efficiency was a little bit better as well. And like I said, it all goes down to if they want to buy in currently on Steph Curry, and this is their best trade asset that they would give up for a major name. So I talked about in the beginning of the video that Brandon Ingram could definitely get traded by the Pelicans this year. Now, that contract is pretty big, so it's tough to get, I think, an equal value big man for him in return, and maybe nobody wants to give up equal value for Brandon Ingram because he's a free agent at the end of the year. So this one would be a little bit more shocking, but there are rumors that it could potentially happen since an extension didn't get done this offseason, and that is Trey Murphy, another wing on this team. So you're not trading Zion Williamson, you're not trading Herb Jones, CJ McCollum is making a lot of money, you just traded for DeJounte Murray. Could Trey Murphy, who's a restricted free agent at the end of this year, be the odd man out? Murphy's 2024 was plagued by injuries a little bit. He did appear in 57 games. He shot 38% from 3 on 8 attempts a night, showing once again he's one of the best 3-point shooters in this league at the small forward position. He's a good rebounder, he's a serviceable defender, but maybe New Orleans thinks that it could work out with Murray, Ingram, and Zion Williamson. They pay Ingram and could get a really good center in return for Trey Murphy. Maybe that's Walker Kessler, maybe that's Onyeka Okongwu, or somebody like that on the open market. Speaking of Onyeka Okongwu, not talking about him, it's going to be the player that's been starting over him since Okongwu was drafted in 2020, and that is Clint Capella, who's on the last year of his contract. Now, Capella is making $22 million, so like Malcolm Brogdon, it's going to be tough to move for him, but it's definitely possible. And since it's the last year of his deal, I don't think it would cost much. I think it would cost maybe a couple second-round picks for someone that has been one of the best rebounders in the NBA at the center position since 2018. But at this point in his career, he's a 25 to 27 minute a night center. He's not going to be someone that can play 33, 34 minutes a night, especially in a playoff series. But with the Hawks kind of in a retool phase, they want to go all in on Onyeka Okongwu, or at least I'd like to think they will. They could want to get rid of Clint Capella by any means necessary at this year's deadline. Let's stay on the topic of centers now. We're going to talk about a Portland Trailblazer center. And if he could prove that he could stay healthy, which is kind of a big if at this point, he is definitely going to get traded, and that's Robert Williams. Robert Williams' career has been plagued by injuries. Pretty much the 2021 season and 2022 are the only years he played above 50 games. The other 4 years in his career, he has played less than 35 games in a single season, including just 6 games last year, and he's already off to a rough start this year. He suffered a hamstring injury in practice, and he's going to be sidelined for a couple weeks. But he's making just $12 million this year, $13 million next year. It's super tradable. They're paying DeAndre Ayton a lot of money. They just drafted Donovan Clingan in the top 10. Robert Williams is definitely the odd man out, and I feel like teams would want to trade for him, but he needs to show that he's healthy. That's been tough for him to show in his career. We're going to end this list off with 3 pretty big names, 3 former All-Stars. Zach LaVine of the Chicago Bulls. the next guy we're going to talk about. Remember when I said that teams could be desperate and want to trade for Jeremy Grant no matter how bad that contract is? I feel like Zach LaVine would be a little bit better of an investment. I know he's making more annually, but he's a better player than Jeremy Grant in my opinion. He's 29 years old, and it's tough. He's owed $43 million this year, $46 million next year, and $48.9 million in 2027. But after this year, it's just 2 years left on the deal. And who knows, maybe he can go back to what he was in 2021 or 2022 or even 2023. All 3 of those years, he was really good. He may even opt out of that player option and look for some longer term guaranteed money. So this may only be a 1.5 year investment if you trade for Zach LaVine at this year's deadline. And when he's been healthy, he's still able to put up 20 plus points, shoot 50% from the field, almost 40% from 3, and 85% from the line. He's a good playmaker. Yes, he's not a great defender, but if you already have a good defensive guard or small forward that you can put next to him, I think you're going to be fine. And maybe a team like the Lakers, the Clippers, the Warriors, the Heat get desperate and look for that marginal increase in trading for Zach LaVine. When I said before that there's 2 scenarios that could happen with the Miami Heat, they could look to move Tyler Hero to go all in this year. Well, maybe they could look to move Jimmy Butler if they feel like they're not going to win a title this year and they may lose him for nothing in free agency. Jimmy Butler is a $52 million player option next year, and they just saw Paul George opt out of his contract this offseason and the Clippers lose him for nothing, and Miami can't have that. So if there's a scenario where the Heat are not living up to their preseason expectations, they don't think they can make a run in the playoffs, and it's seeming more and more likely they're not going to get an extension done with Jimmy Butler and he can leave in free agency, they could call up Golden State, see if they want to pair him up with Steph Curry. They can call up Los Angeles, see if they'd give them Rui Hashimura, D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt and pick. Or maybe Houston gets involved and wants to go all in this year because they have the young assets to trade for Jimmy Butler. So there is a scenario where Miami does not have a great season and Jimmy Butler could get traded throughout this year's regular season. And the last thing we're going to talk about is Chris Paul of the San Antonio Spurs. I love that Chris Paul signed with San Antonio, but I don't expect San Antonio to be a playoff team this year. And I think they should do him right by either trading him at the deadline or buying him out, as he just signed a 1-year deal with San Antonio. He's 39 years old. This may be the last chance he gets at playing for a playoff team in his career. And I hope throughout the first half of this year, he shows everybody else he's not done just yet and can still be one of the best playmakers in all of basketball. So that is going to be for me. I hope you guys did enjoy. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of those players I talked about in the comments below. And if there's a player that I didn't mention that you think could get traded this year, please let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you're not already for NBA content all season long. Make sure you check out my Twitter as well. Link to that is in the description, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.